Hi, I'm Julie Tam, managing broker of LYN Realty in Houston, Texas. Thank you so much for joining me for Smarter Real Estate weekly on Wednesdays, where I arm you with practical strategies to be a smarter buyer, seller, tenant, or landlord, and take you along on some of my real estate adventures. Today, we are talking about how to navigate this very ultra competitive market as a buyer of real estate, and how appropriate the COVID-19 pandemic has affected so much. And I have my second Moderna vaccine shot. I feel great. I feel a little weird, but I just got it today as I'm shooting this video. It's a different day than when you're actually seeing this video. This is going to be in the past by the time you're seeing this video. But anyway, I feel great in terms of like mentally and psychologically and emotionally that finally I'm going to be getting maximum protection. So anyway, that is a very appropriate that we're talking about how this pandemic has affected this housing market. As pretty much everyone has heard, unless you've been living under a rock, the housing market is crazy. We have a shortage of inventory, a shortage of homes, but an increased demand that has just increased during the course of the pandemic as more and more people want to move to a home that better suits their needs because they're spending more time at home. So they're realizing maybe some of the shortcomings that their current home has. Some people are actually gaining a lot of wealth, especially if they're already in the middle to upper class echelon. The pandemic hasn't really hurt them. Perhaps it's actually helped them increase their income, and therefore they're able to upsize their home. So I'm going to talk about how you need to strategize and behave as a buyer in a market like this when it's so competitive, when sellers are receiving multiple offers. The multiple offer situation is just through the roof. A number of years ago when we were going through the Great Recession and coming out of it, and there were lots of short sales and foreclosures, good deals, we were seeing multiple offers. And in fact, I actually had bought a condo. I beat out 26 other offers. There were 27 offers for a condo. That was crazy back then. That was the most offers that I had encountered personally. Some other ones were like 14 offers, or fewer, right? Just maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 offers. Now we're hearing 97 offers. I mean, how do you even go through that many offers and respond in a timely fashion if you're the listing agent representing the seller? Anyway, so on the buyer side, when you're going in with this much competition, how do you differentiate yourself when someone else may have deeper pockets, someone else could offer more money? It's not just about the money, and let me explain why. So first of all, of course, money is important. So you don't want to make a low offer. I mean, in this market, if it's a popular neighborhood and you're seeing a lot of people at the open house, or you've learned through your agent, if you're represented or if you're not, and you're talking to the listing agent, that they've had a lot of showings, a lot of interest. Maybe they'll even tell you that there's multiple offers. Maybe they'll even tell you how many offers they've already received before you submit yours, okay? But don't wait around too long because often these sellers make their decision even in the first 24 hours. Sometimes you might get a couple of days. So if you're slow, if you snooze, you lose. So yes, the price is important. So we want to come in at least at full price, and often over full price. But here's where it gets crazy. Some people are offering, like 10% or 20% over full price, just insane amounts. But that doesn't always work, because if you're getting a loan, that property may not appraise for the price that you're offering. And the lender is going to lend based on that appraised price, not the price under contract. So here's an example. If you are offering on a $300,000 home, okay, it's $300,000. That's the list price. If you are offering, let's say $340,000, because you want to just beat out everybody, but the appraisal comes in only at $320,000, well, if you're getting a loan, let's say you're putting 10% down, you're getting a 90% loan, you're going to get 90% of the $320,000, which is the appraised value, not 90% of $340,000, which is what you have under contract. So you'll have to make up the difference between the two. Or you can ask the seller to lower their price, but in this hot market, it's not as likely. Of course, if you're, under contract already for a couple weeks or a few weeks, that's when the appraisal comes back. Then, of course, maybe the seller has a little bit more incentive at that point because, they don't want to lose all this time on market. You're already getting closer to closing. But here's the other thing. to be more attractive, you may want to waive the appraisal contingency. There is a contingency in the contract that you can put in there where you can back out due to a low appraisal. If you can't agree on, buyer bringing more money to closing or seller bringing the price down to close that gap. So if you waive that contingency, now that's not even on the table anymore. And so the seller doesn't really have so much of an incentive to lower the price because they know if you back out, you're not going to get your earnest money back. The earnest money is typically about 1% of the sales price, but I'll talk about why it should be higher in this market. Okay, so yeah, if you go too crazy with the price, the seller says, well, it's not going to appraise for that much probably, so we're going to have problems, right? The buyer may not be able to close the gap unless you can prove you can, unless you can show them just tons of money in the bank that you have ready and going above and beyond the down payment. But of course, if you can offer cash, then go for it. But not everybody can pay cash, so that's not always an option. Cash can definitely beat out other offers that are financing, all else being equal, because cash is more certain. You're not depending on a lender to approve the loan. Okay, so I'm going to move into more creative ways to structure the offer so that you're not just relying on the price because of these issues that I've mentioned. Before I get into that, let me go ahead and mention where I am, because I forgot to say that. I'm actually in the city of Bel Air, outside the Builders Club, which is a building where we meet with, where builders, use the office space, and there's a conference room, and we meet with builders and our clients. We bring them in. So I've been here several times with different builders, different clients, representing, either side, whether I'm representing the builder or the client. And so I just got out of one of those meetings, and so I'm in my car. My brain is starting to get a little hazy, so I hope I don't misspeak while I'm talking about this. I'll be sure to play this back before I post it online. Anyway, because of that COVID vaccine, I told you it's starting to affect me a little bit. Okay, so other creative ways. And I'm looking off to the side because guess what? This is so cool. Look at this. I'll let you in on a little secret. Ooh, I got notes I'm referring to because this wonderful car of mine, a Tesla Model X, I've actually got a sketch pad I can pull up. It's meant for people to draw and being creative, and have fun in the car if they're waiting in traffic or, just sitting in a parking lot with nothing to do. I guess if you're sitting behind a slow train. But I thought, you know what? There are so many points I want to make sure I don't forget any. I'm going to write these down. So I just used my finger and wrote these notes. Okay. So the first creative thing, you want to put down a higher earnest money. So don't just do the traditional 1%. If you can, put down a few times that or several times that. Option fee, make it higher, make the option period shorter. This is the period during which you can back out of the contract for any reason at all or no reason at all. It doesn't matter. You just have the right to back out, but then you lose that option fee. So the seller knows the lower the dollar amount, then you have really less incentive to stay in the contract because you're not losing that much, right? If you put in $100, you're like, I could lose that. That's okay. Try putting $500 if you can. You show them that really you are that serious, and you probably are going to be in a bit more pain if you lose the $500. I'm just adjusting. My wrist is getting a little tired the way I was holding this phone. And so same thing with shorter option period. Now during the option period is usually when you do your inspections. But here's the thing. If the home is newer, for example, and you've already kind of visually looked at it, things seem to be working, you hope the seller was honest on the seller's disclosure, then you may feel more comfortable putting down a higher option period because you think, well, chances are I probably won't need to back out. Typically, the costliest items are if the roof needs to be replaced or the foundation has problems. You may not be able to tell the roof's condition because you can't see that high, but the foundation you can certainly tell more so because when you're in the home, if you feel that the floors are, sloped or there's cracks that are going diagonally down the wall, that those are signs of foundation problems. So if you're not seeing obvious signs of that, then you may not be as concerned. Even if the AC or the water heater, those have issues, those are still going to be less expensive typically than major roof and foundation problems. Structural issues tend to be the most expensive because they're just huge areas and they're costly items. So so basically kind of gauge how comfortable you are. If you're buying an old home, then obviously putting down a huge option fee, there's somewhat of a chance that you're going to lose it, especially if you see signs of those types of issues. An option period, typically you often see, about 10 days. People like to have that because it gives you the first few days to schedule the inspection. The inspector you want may not be available until a few days into the option period, could be 4 or 5 days in. So after that happens, you get the report back, you're looking at it, you might need to get, estimates, or if your inspector is nice enough to at least tell you roughly, a ballpark of what certain things will cost, or if you have the knowledge, of course, even better. But anyway, then you're negotiating with the seller back and forth. That could take a few more days. You can easily see how that 10-day period gets eaten up. Well, during this competitive market, people are asking for 7 days, some even asking maybe for 5 days. If they feel confident they've got an inspector who can get in right away, turn that report around within 24 hours or even same day, or at least you go there and you talk to the inspector, get there on the spot, verbal information to you, so at least you know if there's major problems or not, and then can quickly decide whether to proceed or how to proceed with negotiating either a credit from the seller for the repairs or actual repairs. Okay, and then the other thing is things that you can pay for that you don't want to ask the seller to pay for. So typically in Texas, we have the seller paying for the owner's title policy to protect the buyer. The buyer pays for the lender's title policy. But in this market, a lot of buyers are offering to pay for that title policy because for a home that's like in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, the title policy is a couple $1,000. So that can save the seller money. You can also pay for a new survey if a new survey is needed. Don't ask the seller to pay for it. For your kind of typical average home in Houston area, your survey you're probably looking at $400 or $500, not too much. And of course, don't ask the seller to pay for any of your closing costs. You might even offer to pay for some of their closing costs, okay? Because they have to pay for commissions for the realtor on both sides. They have to pay certain title fees and document drafting fees for the attorney for the title company that are typically split a certain way by the state of Texas. And, as a caveat, I am talking about Texas because that's where I practice real estate and a lot of the typical things that go on in the greater Houston area market. Okay, and finally, you want to ask, what does the seller want? What kind of terms do they want? When it's not competitive, you don't want to ask that question because, you're trying to not show your cards, or you don't want to look desperate. You don't want to get into an inferior negotiating position. But in this market, my hand is starting to shake. Let me twist my wrist around yet another direction. In this market, you want to ask the seller, what can I do for you, right? What are you looking for? Are you looking for a quick closing? Because, a lot of times people think, oh, the seller wants to close fast because they want to, stop paying all the holding costs for the house. They're getting out of the house. If the home is vacant, that's probably the case. But if the seller is still living there, maybe they actually don't want you to close so soon. Maybe they want you to close later, so that gives them time to find their next home if they haven't found it, to move to their next home, or they may want a lease back, okay, a seller's temporary residential lease, where after closing, they can rent the house back from you. You're the new owner, and so they're the tenant, and they can stay there maybe for a week, 2 weeks, however long they need. Recently, I had a buyer client where they're leasing back for the maximum number of days that works with that form, the seller's temporary residential lease, which is 90 days. The seller had surgery, didn't want to do a big move or whatnot, and so said, hey, can we have 90 days just to stay at the home, and then we can slowly move to our next home. So that is an option as well. And in that lease back, again, as the buyer, if you're really, really wanting that home, then you may want to just don't charge the seller rent. You may want to not charge them a deposit. I'm trying to think of what else you can do. Maybe even offer certain things like turning the utilities to your name. Hopefully the seller doesn't use that many utilities or that much. You could ask them for their utility bills, but that's just going to slow things down, and you don't want to ask too many questions in today's market because you are probably going to lose out. But hopefully they don't have their AC on super cool in the summer or the heat on super hot in the winter. You just may not know, or use a ton of water or a ton of gas for cooking and appliances and whatnot. But anyway, these are just some different ways. There certainly are more ways, and we've heard some bizarre stories where the buyer is literally offering to keep a certain room a certain way for the seller's memory, so that they don't feel bad that a wall got painted over, or don't remove this, don't ever remove this light fixture in this home as long as you own it, because there's meaning, or I don't know, whatever. Or maybe there's a pet buried in the backyard, and you're gonna offer to put a flower there every month for the seller or something like that. But we've read about some really bizarre things that are practically unheard of. But in this market, people are getting desperate. They want to buy a home and they know there's few options. So if they really want to move and that home is just good enough for them, they're willing to do whatever it takes. So you can just think outside the box on that one. All right. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please reach out to me by commenting or sending me a message. And I thank you so much for watching Smarter Real Estate weekly on Wednesdays. Please subscribe and like on YouTube and Facebook. And I hope I'll see you again another week. Have a great one. Bye.